33. Pesh let his eyes sweep across the parlor of his suite one more time, wanting everything to be at its best. Not so much in order to impress his visitor with the opulence of the place, but because he wanted to strike a pose. The place had to look like somewhere an important person might live. The inn had given him a suite of 3 rooms, with the sitting room finished to Pesh's specifications. The low table and cushions had been replaced by one of the more comfortable height, plus a half-dozen straight-backed chairs. Pesh had no idea where the management had procured the items, but suspected they'd had to special order them from some local carpenter. They still smelled of recent wood workmanship. Taking a chair that faced the door, he settled down to wait. He was still sitting there a quarter of an hour later when a knock came at the door. He rose quickly, opened the door, then closed and bolted it as soon as his visitor had entered. He'd installed the bolt personally, for it was the only way to secure the entrance when he'd first occupied the room. Locks and bolts, Pesh had noticed, were reserved for the houses and businesses of the leaders of the 7 oligarchies and the Shitayosha. That was one of the ways to identify their property. It had locks. It was how Pesh had been able to trace the ownership of the iron mine to Sirayuki. Every door and gate in the facilities surrounding the mine had locks on them. Interestingly, the door of the offices of the firm that nominally owned the mine did not. It was obvious bogus and of little value. The visitor entered the room silently, taking the chair to which Pesh gestured him from across the table. Pesh poured 2 small cups of budo shi and waited for Subash Chi to begin his presentation. He was the Sanyu, the high priest of the Yamatukaze, who had traveled to this meeting in Usagumo at what was presumably some risk. The Usagumo and the Yamatukaze were in a period of truce since before the strike against Takuta's people and their allies in the woods 3 days earlier. The fact that Vost had engineered a preemptive land strike against the forces of the Yamatukaze as the attack was beginning had not seemed to damage the fabric of the truce. Among other things, Pesh hoped to find out just how stable the agreement was. "You had no trouble finding the place, I trust," he said to begin the conversation. His visitor nodded and smiled. "There have been many changes since I last spoke to your agent," continued Pesh. "There have been certain offers made on your part and the parts of others that must be considered." Subash Chi sat straight and rigid in the chair, his eyes fixed directly on those of his host as he tried to gauge the other man's strengths and weaknesses. The tradition of the Yamatukaze was one of constant conflict with the other enclaves. Antipathy had existed among the 3 since the beginning of recorded time, but the animosity of the Yamatukaze was the strongest. The Osio and the Usagumo had drifted from the 5-fold path. Each had paid nominal respect to the Yamatukaze as the religious exemplars, but over time they had turned their backs on the true way. The Osio had become rigid in their thinking, allowing only members of the nobility to become leaders. They kept the peasants as underlings, a class whose sweat and blood supported those whom birth had placed over them. The Osio had lost all feeling for the good of the population, coming to accept power as the only absolute. They were a worthless amalgamation without whom the land would be better off. The Usagumo, on the other hand, had turned toward the motive of profit over the needs of the people. Through time, they had gained control of the means of production and distribution. Despite the fact that they were a despicable lot, the Osio could not eliminate them completely because it would lead to the ruin of the others. She understood that it would be better to subjugate the Usagumo than to destroy them. The Yamatukaze had been planning that subjugation for as long as he or any of the other Sanyu could remember. Now this little man presented the best chance to accomplish that dream. The forces the man claimed to control could drive the Usagumo to their knees without the need to destroy the entire enclave. But it was important that she know what the man wanted in return. He waited now to learn just that. "There's a great deal I can do for you, Chi," said Pesh, when his guest made no reply. He watched as the silent priest lifted the cup of budoshu and let the liquid brush his lips. Pesht could smell the pungent aroma of the hot wine that rose from his own cup. He had ordered the best budoshu available, and he hoped the Sanyu appreciated it.
You have already done much for me. The budoshu is of a very fine variety, and the kashi is without peer. I am in your debt.
Pesht understood about debt and status. These people in the enclaves were sensitive to both. Tsurayuki had been obviously concerned about losing status among his peers, which was the sticking point on the subject of the adoption. Pesht had let the matter stew for a while, and the Shirayosha had finally given in. The word had come earlier in the day, and now Pesht was euphoric about his own future. The Sanyu would have to come up with a significant offer. The budoshu and kashi had been ordered before the event, but they probably would help the Sanyu make his decision. The Sanyu didn't have to know Pesht had ordered the stuff as a celebration for himself. Let the priest continue to think of it as in his own honor.
In Namatukaze,
began Chi, clearing his throat,
we have a different hierarchy. It takes a long time, for many a lifetime, to reach a level of sublime contemplation. The way is long and difficult, and only the most dedicated can make the journey. Many begin, but few will achieve the end desired.
Chi let his words sink in. This visitor from beyond the stars, as he and the others claimed to be, needed to understand in detail how strict was the discipline among the Amatukaze. One of the many aspects that gave the Amatukaze superiority over the others was the severity of the training.
You must understand. You must absorb the concept of the five,
continued the Sanyu.
There is a fivefold path to enlightenment, and 5 pillars that hold up the truth. These things must be appreciated.
Is this going to be a lecture on philosophy? Asked Pesht. I've heard all this before from the first Sanyu who talked to me. He was full of the same stuff. Frankly, Chi, I don't care a hoot for all that. I want to know what you want from me and what you'll give me for that service. I'm not looking for some reward in the great beyond or in the distant future. I'm not interested in some inner peace. Get that straight from the start.
But without inner peace, there is nothing. All the worldly trappings of your existence pale in comparison to that which glows from within. That is why our junior bukoshi wear only simple gowns, sleep on the floor, and eat plain rice. They must allow the inner light to grow. Simplicity is everything.
Right. That's why your temple glows at night. That's why you wear the embroidered, bejeweled gowns. That's why you recognize fine budoshu and kashi when you have it. Don't give me that story about being simple and poor. Your idea of 5 is to have 5 courses at every meal, 5 wines with every course, and 5 layers of goose down under you when you sleep. That's what the 5 is all about. Pesht was enjoying himself. This dealing from a strong position was not bad at all.
There are ways,
said the Sanyu, clearing his voice and letting his eyes drop to the table.
There are ways. We could always validate you as a being of a higher level. You could become a second level, a full Sanyu.
I'm not sure I want to be a priest. I think I'd like to be higher than that. Perhaps higher than you. What comes above you?
There is nothing above me. There are only the philosophers and great thinkers who have laid down the tenets of our religion.
Then let me be one of those. I can tell y'all what to do. That sounds fair and just.
That would give you a power that no one has ever had.
Someone did. There was someone who established all that claptrap that you guys spout. Why do all those guys have to be dead? There was a time when they were alive, though, there wouldn't be any record.
But they were people of great simplicity and strength. They were thinkers.
So it's time for a non-thinker. Time for someone who acts. I can act. I can see to it that the Amatu Kaze becomes supreme. Maybe you people have been sitting on your backside so long that you've lost the ability to really do anything. Look, Chi, I have the power to do something that none of you has been able to do for 500 years. Now's the time. Swallow your pride or your face or anything else and go with it. Make me your supreme speaker. Then it will get done.
I will have to think about that, said the Sanyu, rising from his chair. There are many aspects to consider. The future of the Amatukaze is at stake. Perhaps there is a way for us to arrange this matter.
Pesh escorted his guest to the door. There was no one in the corridor, and the Sanyu departed unseen. Closing the door behind him, Pesh smiled. Do you think he bought your idea? Asked Seagroves, suddenly emerging from his hiding place in the bedroom. You heard it all? Do you believe that garbage about being simple and poor? I wanted to laugh in his face. I like the bit about becoming the philosopher for the religion, said Seagroves, as he swallowed what was left of the budoshu from one of the ceramic cups, then filled it again with the wine. I can just see you as Confucius or something. If you get to the top spot, what's in it for me?
What do you want?
I can make you anything you desire. How about you sit at my right hand and speak for me? Think of it, the mouthpiece of God. They don't really have God, said Seagroves. They just have a bunch of dead people who said a bunch of things. Right. The only difference is that we'd be alive. Those guys were alive once, and they didn't really take full advantage of it. I plan to make full use of the power. If people are gonna sit at my feet and listen to me, you can be sure I'll tell them what I want. And they can jolly well jump when I say so. The only thing they'll have a chance to ask is how far on the way up. What about the Osio? You were supposed to hear from them, too. Creeps, that's all they are. Pesh poured the last of the wine into his cup. Trouble with these cups, he thought, was that they didn't hold enough. That's one thing he'd change. No matter where he went, he'd have big flagons. No use drinking something if you couldn't pour it down. The problem with the Osio, he said, is that they're too servile. Nothing like a military system to breed civility. They promised me anything I wanted. Wanted to make me their king. They said it wouldn't be hard. I didn't talk to the boss. Maybe he would have offered something else. It didn't sound like he'd be willing to bite the bullet so I could get the job. Anyway, the other guys offered to bump him off. That wasn't the word they used, of course, but they said they'd get rid of the big O and put me in his place. Said I could have the job for life. There's only one thing wrong with bumping off the big O to make room for another. It could become habit forming. Know what I mean? How long before another of them got the idea that I could be eliminated just as easily and another stud put in my place? Or how long before any of you figured it out? I'd have to eliminate the whole lot of you just to keep myself alive. I don't think I want to rule like that. Not that I wouldn't be willing to eliminate some of you. Seagroves looked at the Javelin pilot. Pesh drove the weakest of the three mechs. There was no reason why the little rat-faced man should be the one in charge. I still like the deal I have here. This is where I started, and this is where I think I'll stay. I'll take that into consideration before I make my decision, said Pesh with a smile. Don't worry, big fella. You are a definite and important part of my plans. But just think about it. If we go with the Amatu Kaze, you'll be an almost god.